Shaquille takes it inside, and Shaquille O'Neal took it in. Lost it again.
Well, many viewers of mine may recognize Shaquille O'Neal, the colossal figure shown in the video above. The star of today's show is China's own little giant, Yao Ming. Actually, the star of today's show is sharks, and you have all been clickbait! Ha! But, Shark, Shaquille O'Neal, that means we just call him Shark for a reason. Well, let's talk about Yao Ming first. As the first Chinese player to enter NBA, Yao Ming is an iconic figure, not only in China, but throughout Asia. His towering presence and immense talent make him the pride of all Chinese and Asian athletes. In fact, Yao's impact was so profound that the Chinese basketball faced a significant decline after he retired from international events, or domestic one, unfortunately. On April 4th, 2016, Yao Ming was introduced into the prestigious Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame alongside former NBA superstar Shaquille O'Neal and Allen Iverson. He holds the distinction of being the first and, so far, the only Asian player to receive such honor. Yao's success extended beyond the basketball court. He played a vital role in opening up the Chinese market for the NBA and fostering the development of basketball in China. Today, China boasts the largest share of NBA's international market, contributing significantly to the league's global revenue. His influence even reached the political sphere, as the Chinese president, dictator, Xi Jinping met with the Magic Johnson during the US visit in 2012, shortly after taking office. This demonstrates the profound impact of Yao Ming's legacy. However, today's focus is not only on his basketball career, but also on his remarkable efforts in the conservation of wildlife, especially sharks. If you're familiar with shark conservation, you've likely heard of the notorious shark fin soup. The shark fin soup are made from the cartilage tissue in shark fins. It has long been a delicacy in Chinese cuisine due to its unique taste and texture. Once, and also today, considered a status symbol alongside ingredients like swift's nest and abalone since the Song to the Qing dynasty. Shark fin soup has been a staple in Chinese celebrations, including events like weddings or formal meetings between bureaucrats and businessmen. However, shark fin itself has little to no flavor, and it is essentially just cartilage, necessitating the use of various seasons to give it a taste. This culinary tradition's impact mirrors that of American beef industry and Japan's tuna fishing industry, wreaking havoc on the world's natural systems. Approximately 73 to 100 million sharks are killed annually, with many species pushed to the brink of extinction due to this trade. The common victim of this trade includes the scalloped hammerhead shark, the oceanic white-tip shark, and thresher sharks. Not to mention the brutal practice that when fishermen harvesting the shark fins of these sharks, they often do not kill the shark outright before finning them, but just definning them and throwing the definned shark back into the ocean until the sharks slowly bleed to death or at worst suffocate. For many of these shark species, only rely on obligate ram ventilation in order to breathe. Here's a funny quiz question. For my cunning and smart viewers, can you decipher what is the definition just by hearing the term obligate ram ventilation? For other constricty fishes, such as Batodia or rays, are also frequently hunted for their enormous fins, and for manta rays even face threats due to the superstition about eating their gills. And Yao Ming, a dedicated conservationist, had produced numerous public service announcements with World Aid and other renowned Chinese and international celebrities. In these well-produced ads, Yao Ming passionately implores Chinese consumers to refrain from consuming shark fin soup, championing the famous slogan. He has also actively participated in the promotion of conservation of many other wildlife species, such as the famous northern white rhinoceros, which is now functionally extinct subspecies of the white rhinos. They are also one of the victims of China's wildlife poaching market. I just love this picture of Yao Ming standing next to this fully mature white rhino, because despite being the fourth largest terrestrial megafauna today, he dwarfs the rhino just because how big of a human specimen he is. I remember seeing this when I was small, but I cannot find a source for this, but I recall someone interviewed him after the rhino attempted to cuddle with him, and they said felt just like that time when O'Neill tried to bypass him in a basketball game, and the two giants collided with each other. Aww. This is a H-Bomber Guy reference, by the way. I want to use something a bit more wholesome to lead into something a lot more sad. For nearly 30 years, various nature conservation organizations worldwide has been calling for the end of the destructive practice of overfishing sharks for their fins, and their efforts has yielded significant results. Most developed Western countries has implemented varying level of legislation to ban this practice. In the United States, the earliest relevant law aimed at protecting sharks can track back to the Clinton era.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
The classic line.
Sank for something, you Epstein Island dwelling predator. In 2022, President Biden even further strengthened these measures by signing the Shark Fin Sales Elimination Act. It's worth noting that this legislation faced opposition from Florida's Republican Senator Marco Rubio, who, despite his high-profile stance against China in other matters, opposed the U.S. ban on shark fin for export to China. This contradiction is certainly intriguing to say the least. What's even more interesting is after he tried to block this bill himself, he introduced another legislation called Sustainable Shark Fishery and Trade Act. Instead of fully banning the practice of shark fisheries in China, he thinks it's a good idea to continue it, but just at a lesser degree. And he never stated any detailed policy positions or introduced new industry standards supported by the scientific community in his legislation he hypocritically proposed. What a bag of scum. Ugh. So, from one scum to another. One day, I was just casually scrolling the Chinese internet on Bilibili, the largest video website in China, with the feature of Danmaku subtitling. It's like a chat on YouTube or Twitch, but they flow over the screen, and every video actually capped all these chat on the timestamp. The video is first established to broadcast anime, so vast majority of the users on the website are young people. And if you remember anything I talked with Wash, you probably may see this coming a little bit. And just like the red pill and fascist outlets in America, which has pretty strong parallel here, Chinese fascist propagandists are all drawn to these websites like flies over flesh to indoctrinate Chinese when they're still young. And just I was scrolling through some of my recommendation, I stumbled upon the old video featuring Yao Ming advocating for shark conservation. It triggered a realization in me. I remember that World Aid, the organization behind the video, had gotten himself into a lot of trouble, much like Paperclip and also WWF. For those who are unfamiliar with Paperclip, I shared their story during my conservation with Vosh months ago. They are a non-government education channel dedicated to spread science to the public in a more consumable way, especially to younger generations, like quirky cuts and facts. However, a couple of years ago, they faced baseless, wide-range accusations from Chinese nationalists as fascists and many state-sponsored media, which are also far-right, falsely claiming they were conspiring with the West to strip Chinese people the rights to eat meat. This accusation arose just because Paperclip worked with the WWF World Wildlife Fund and shed light on the environmental impact of the modern meat industry on a global scale. While WorldAid wasn't directly involved in the Paperclip controversy, they too faced backlash. WorldAid also proposed a reduction of meat consumption, employing Chinese celebrity to endorse their message through posters and short video in public spaces, often in airports, just like what they did to stop wildlife poaching. This approach led them to face the wrath of critics. I found myself intrigued by how today's young Chinese nationalists will react to an organization like WorldAid, which has been active in China for over 2 decades. So I looked up and sheesh. Okay. That's enough fascist rambling for now, at least. How about some debunking time? I will say my conclusion first. These fascist propagandists are lying through their asses for the nationalists to just eat it up so they can use it as some kind of defense for China being responsible for the endangerment of global shark population. And in order for me to create a rebuttal that does not involve me translating a huge chunk of Chinese propaganda video and posting it here, I'm going to cite a Chinese propaganda article that's basically telling the same point and is more accessible for my English-speaking audience, because you guys can just read it using a machine translator, and I can't help but notice the propaganda video and the propaganda article, which are published by very different people, different organizations, and both claim to be the original to each other, were posted in the same months and the same year. So if there's plagiarism involved, you do have to sort it out yourself, I guess. Oh well, as if these people ever care about such thing. So the overarching claim of this video and article is the following. First, the Chinese government has decreased the domestic shark fin soup consumption, but the global harvest of shark has not decreased because the West also fished for them, which is why the global shark population has decreased significantly. The second, the Westerners, the European Americans, are all very fond of shark meat, but they don't want to take the bad rap. So they lie alongside every shark scientist, every conservationist group. Americans and the Westerners also have a similar kind of superstition of chondroitin and squalene, which are extracted from shark liver. So the endangerment of shark population around the world has nothing to do with Chinese at all, like ever. And this is just a conspiratorial accusation from the Western cabal to demonize the brave Chinese people and remove our traditional rights, our heritage of eating shark fin soup, just like how they attempted to remove our rights to eat meat to save the planet. And Yao Ming was tricked by evil Western NGOs into lying to Chinese people about the harm of shark fin soup. Oof, now that's a handful. Let's start with the first claim. So a recurring theme is that when debunking these idiotic fascist propaganda, these are trained propagandists. When they lie, they usually don't pull everything out of their ass. The thing they say sometimes actually have merits in it, but mixed with a huge chunk of lies. For example, over time, the Chinese government has put in, well, I wouldn't call it legislation, but more like a industry standard, a gesture, a signal that decreased the consumption of shark fin soup. For example, they would have internal document telling bureaucrats they should stop doing it, or the government will not pay for your bills if you are a bureaucrat buying these shark fin soup for your wealthy friends. And through that, the consumption of shark fin soup has decreased. China is indeed no longer the largest exporter and importer of shark fins. However, it's pretty close to the top, and there's also something to do with this fascinating thing that the Chinese government does to manipulate the number to make them look less evil in the international theater. And that is Hong Kong. For some reason, Hong Kong has the largest number of both imports and exports of shark fin. Over the years, the number of shark fin imports to Hong Kong has significantly decreased, but I do find it interesting that even for Hong Kong's dense population, the number of shark fin imports still seems rather excessive. Forgive me for not having some journalism sources here. Still, for very well-known reasons, it's pretty damn hard to conduct journalism in Hong Kong right now, after what happened to them a couple of years ago. Still, I think it is reasonable to speculate that a significant number of imports go directly to China, or are consumed by essentially Chinese oligarchs and bureaucrats. How convenient it is for China to split Hong Kong off when they use it to split off world trafficking numbers. These shameless bastards not only use data that is inherently unreliable and downsides for the reason I mentioned, but also try to continue to distort the facts that the area of the data to create the illusion that the Chinese shark fin market has no impact on the world's marine ecosystem. And then they're trying to suggest that this is an insignificant amount of shark compared to global harvest. What in the devil? This genius propaganda doesn't seem to fucking know what shark fins are dehydrated when they're packaged. That significantly lower their weight to begin with. Do they not even know how dehydration works? Not to mention, these people seem to believe that because China has decreased the consumption of shark fin soup, which may be not to the extent that they believe, they're somehow free from all the blame for the decline of shark population around the globe, despite being the reason there's a shark fin market to begin with. This is like saying Europeans and American white colonizers are somehow not to blame for the extinction of passenger pigeons or stellar sea cow or even the global anthropogenic climate change because they engage in conservation earlier than other countries for some buffoonish reasons. Remember, China has never created real legislation that officially bans shark fin trade, and China has a huge underground trafficking market, which is a pretty well-known fact among conservationists around the world, mind you. Then these buffoons just go on and on to talk about how many species of shark around the world are still have a significant population decline after China's consumption number and import number have supposedly gone down, which is just total gibberish at this point. One of the leading causes of wildlife population decline in a global scale is the destruction of their habitat. And for marine mammal, one thing we really have to keep in mind is fucking overfishing! In general, overfishing does not only affect the fish we eat, but also the fish that eat the fish we eat. And the overall decrease in the global fish population could even be one of the reasons why the amount of shark that are consumed globally also has a negative trend. It does not necessarily mean that demand had went down to a similar level. It was just because there are fewer sharks to find. And of course, cetaceans are often the victim alongside the sharks, and we might talk about them on this channel on some other day. Not to mention, a lot of sharks that were supposedly harvested in other parts of the world are due to bycatch from unprofessionalism and inadequate technology. The next point to debunk is that Westerners somehow are eating all the sharks instead of the Chinese, which again has some merit in it, just like the previous lies. It is true that sharks plays a role in traditional European cooking, such as the hakari from Iceland, which is made from fermented and dried Greenland sharks and other sleeper shark species. Seriously, you guys should look up these super cool sharks. They're huge and live a very, very long time because of their unique adaptation leading to very low body metabolism. They also have a fascinating hunting behavior that will bite their prey in half despite sleeping half of the time and smelling extra bad. This is because they contain urea in order to maintain osmotic balance. And this is also the chemical that make our pee smell bad. So there's also another compound in our body called trimethylene oxide, or TMAO for short. When I was taking ichthyology courses during my undergrad years, my professor told me sleeper shark have much higher level of TMAO in their body compared to other deep-sea cartilaginous fish, which is usually where these chemicals are found. They also use these chemicals to maintain osmotic balance, and if you eat them before some very specific process, such as fermentation to break them down, you can get nausea or even pass out just by eating them. The article and also the video also mention British people eating dogfish by turning them into fish and chips. You can even get some of these in East Coast, I believe. And in my opinion, this is the most insulting thing that could ever happen to these cute little fish. Not only they got killed, but they also got turned to British food. And to be fair, their population has indeed been decreasing over the year because of over-harvesting in this regard. This stays true, including when they talk about a lot of some of the larger shark species population decline. There is a legit criticism that can be graded towards the Western capitalist fish industry. Whenever they ran out of fish they used to eat for thousands of years, such as the Atlantic or southern bluefin tunas due to industrial fishing, they just move on to another fish species that could potentially be profitable. Blue sharks, which is often a casualty of bycatch when hunting for tunas, becomes a kind of morbid replacement of fish, of tunas, despite them used to being not really seen as worth eating fish because of their bad smell. Only after many process and treatment that they probably become a little more palatable to European consumers. But capitalist fishmonger doesn't care if they just move on to another fish that may lead to another fish go extinct. They've done this plenty of time. Probably that's practically the standard protocol of the industry at this point. Look up what the fuck is a Chilean sea bass. Yeah, those fancy fish you can find in your market or your restaurant. Don't buy them and tell the chef whenever you see them on your menu it's bad to sell these fish. This may not change your mind, but it's still nice to bully these horrible people for selling endangered species for profit. But now I must divert my video into another segment, not related for the topic today, but just for industrial fishing. Even though this video is mainly about overfishing of sharks, which the largest market locates in China, that doesn't mean the West is somehow innocent when it comes to the damaging global oceanic ecosystem. Overfishing is a global issue. It is the result of capitalism. It's not regional, and China is not some big bad that is the only bad actor in the system. It's just a major player. There are a few good documentaries you can watch about the effects of overfishing that were made throughout the last few decades. I would strongly recommend, I would actually beg all of my audience to watch these documentaries when you have the time and follow some of the suggestions the filmmaker and the scientists behind the documentary tell you to do. These documentaries are The End of the Line and The Last Ocean, which are two of my favorite documentaries related to overfishing. Some of my audience, if you watch a lot of Netflix and stuff, might have noticed that I did not mention certain Netflix documentaries. Yes, I meant Seaspiracy. This so-called documentary is full of distortion of the research of scientific researchers who actually active in the front line of oceanic conservation. Like, you don't have to lie to tell people what they need to do to protect the ocean. The science is always on our side. Moreover, this has led to many successful examples of oceanic conservation when there are scientists actually leading the cause and using scientific evidence of peer-reviewed research to back it up, such as laws created to protect bluefin tuna after advocacy group led by scientists with data and policy in mind, instead of media talking heads just telling consumers to stop eating any fish. There's a reason why Monterey Bay Aquarium created something called the Seafood Watch 24 years ago. Man, I love them. I love Monterey Bay Aquarium. They're so good. People should really visit that place. It's beautiful. I'm not saying that this is the end-all be-all solution. There's only so much you can do with electoralism or gently nudge politicians into doing good thing. But let's not let perfect be the enemy of good here. I find this kind of behavior, the one from Seaspiracy, extra abhorrent because it's not really fighting for nature conservation at all, but just trying to gain attention and reputation like a propagandist. In essence, he's no different from those hateful right-wing capitalist lackeys. I would even make a claim that I suspect him to be in the same group as these propagandists and just pretending to be a person who cares about the environment to clout fishing. When it comes to literatures regarding overfishing, I would strongly suggest my audience to check out The Four Fish, The Future of the Lost World Food. It is a very comprehensive historical literature regarding how we humans have overfished many fish species that used to be immensely important for us in both diet and culture into near extinction. And speaking of lying propagandists, another major point I must make is that these fascists spew another lie, another nasty lie in order to manipulate their audience. They keep bringing up this chemical called Squalene and claim that the West harvests more sharks for producing these than the Chinese ever could for shark fin soup. And this is the real reason why they kill so many sharks every year. So the problem, or in this case, the lie, about this statement is the shark population have decreased over the years because of overfishing for squalene. This stays true. Even include some of the larger shark species populations decline. However, when I was reading through these bullshit articles, even as someone who doesn't specialize in studying of fish and sharks, I have research in ichthyology, but it's not my particular field of expertise. But even for me, I couldn't help but think to myself, wait, don't they notice that the Chinese name for squalene is 九沙溪? It literally means dogfish alkane. What do they think squalene came from? Okay, so for those who don't know, squalene is a kind of steroid precursor used in many medical science products today, which is traditionally extracted and discovered from the liver oils of shark. But not all sharks can be feasibly harvested to obtain this chemical. There's a reason why they're named after dogfish in Chinese after all, because it was first discovered from these cute sea puppies. They're mostly commonly found in deep water sharks like dogfish because they have very oil-rich livers. One of the reasons why spiny dogfish and other species of dogfish got over-harvested in such large quantity for the past few decades is indeed because of the demand for this chemical from pharmaceutical industries. However, the shark harvested for the shark fin soup and those harvested for the liver are completely different species. But shark fin trade prefers larger species, larger oceanic species, which larger body sizes comes with much bigger fins. When I first thought about this, I wasn't checking any sources, by the way. I just looked up some of the sources. I was overjoyed and so proud of my autistic brain because it was aligned with my assumption all along. The two group of sharks with drastically different levels of biomass abundance, usage, and ecological impact simply cannot be mixed or, in this case, purposefully confused. Not to mention, squalene can also be produced synthetically from plant materials. Using global squalene production to prove that European or American consume all the sharks is just blatant nonsense. And you know what part makes me angry the most? When these Chinese fascists shit out their lies and feed them down to the Chinese youth, they have the audacity to pretend to give a damn about oceanic shark species, the keystone species that are most harmed by shark fin trade. By the ancestors, you are the reason they went in danger to begin with. One of the reasons why Chinese fishermen do not fish shark fin soup around China Sea themselves is because they have depleted their shark population long ago. And since they have created this pretense in their ignorant audience brain that China is somehow free of responsibility, they make some of the most outrageous claims after this. All of these conservation NGOs like WWF and World Aid and all these scientists who have dedicated their lives to protect this beautiful world of ours and these magnificent creatures of the sea are all part of some Western cabals, are just chess pieces to be played by the evil Anglo-Saxons. They dare to use science and evidence and conservation policy to take away Chinese people's holy rights to eat shark fin soup. Just like the time those evil NGOs advocate for lowering their carbon footprint by consuming less meat, which is actually a grand conspiracy to remove Chinese people's rights to eat meat. In the propaganda article, they even speculate the reason why these evil NGO who work for Western cabal did this so their Anglo-Saxon master can eat all the sharks and the meat is, which is just like, what the fuck are they even talking about? The worst thing about these Chinese media outlets is that they maliciously obfuscate many scientific concepts and data and ignore real scientific research in order to fool the ignorant Chinese young public. And of course, the whole video and the article was filled with inflammatory lies and lacked any scientific sources or citations. Here, I have to give praises to some of my fellow Chinese science enthusiasts on the internet who have pointed out some of the filthy lies of the propagandists, knowing they are going to take a huge risk of getting harassed or even doxxed by the fans of those channels. And precisely because the existence of the great firewalls and censorship is really hard for Chinese people to find reliable sources by themselves, nationalist fervor and consistent exclusion of dissidents is also one of the reasons why crap like this can just flow to the top and get millions of views on a website that's supposed to be popular among young people. And what's even more interesting is when I thought I am done with this article, I saw this. Wait, what?Since I'm going to dig into these pieces of shit, I'm just going to drop the balls then. So for those who doesn't know, Shen Gaoxian is a pathetic Chinese thought leader, well, in this case, is big quote-unquote, and a pretty open pelagianetic ultranationalist. He coined the term 入关人 and then 入关学, meaning the study of breaking through the gate, or people to break through the gate, is a historic metaphor to the famous historical event that happened around 400 years ago when the forces of Qing Dynasty Manchurians broke through the gate of the Great Wall and invaded the Ming Dynasty China of the time. The ultimate goal, or LARP, to be frank, for these people, is to have China imperialistically invade the West to reshape the global culture and the global order so they can benefit from it. As many of them dream of the day they could eat big steak in big houses having sex with white women, these people are not able to interfere with any Chinese foreign policy decision, so there's almost 0% the chance we're actually going to see these people's dream being accomplished in any way. But it's just pathetic and ironic. It is just a highly misogynistic fascist white dream. But it's still really concerning to see how much influence these people have on the internet, especially for a place that's supposed to be filled with young Chinese audience. Because as I mentioned before, again, in China, there are very few people in the way of combating these fascist scumbags, and the Chinese government censorship will only work in their favor. Because the government doesn't care if some ultra-nationalists got poisoned in the mind or poisoned the mind of the youth. Is good for the stability of the state, at least in the short term, that is. The video format of start video of talking about famous people and being sillying around, but then segue into something serious and needs debunking is something I learned from H. Bomber Guy's wonderful video essays. And thank you, Harry, for influencing my sense of humor through 10 years of leftist indoctrination, which I highly appreciate. And again, ba we guana we mini ba. I am so honored and happy that this video can finally come out. Thank you, my friend Xylophone, for editing this video for me. I obviously cannot do this without you. Thanks, my audience, for the generous support you guys all provided for me along the way. Thank you, my dear girlfriends, for being my script doctor. Thank you for all of my friends who helped me along the way. For the topic of the next video, I have 3 in mind, and I want my audience to comment on these so I can see what is your reaction to kind of vote on it. The first one would be my personal, very subjective take, or even a tier list of Asian representation in popular American media for the past 10 or 20 years I have seen. The second one would be my take on Avatar: The Last Airbender's live action show, as well as some of my other opinion on other streaming service remake of famous franchise. And the third one would be a comprehensive guide to Chinese cuisine and why our culinary tradition is often misunderstood or underappreciated even among leftists or progressive circle. I'm looking forward for all of your responses, and feel free to ask me any questions. Maybe I'll just answer some of them in my second video. Hope you guys enjoy my video, and see you next time. Thank you for tuning in into my long-awaited video. I highly appreciate any kind of support. Feel free to subscribe, share, and I wish you all have a great day. Or, as Yao Ming, the Iron Dragon, would say, long may your understanding continue. Thank you, and wish you all a great rest of your day. The Lord of the Jade Sword gladly receives you. Let us not allow pleasantry to delay more beneficial discussion.